a lot going on. I'll let you guys kind of filter in as we go on here. I'm going to get into a few of the topics, but let's start off with the announcements like we always do. Guys, thank you for all the support, even over the holiday season. It meant so much. Christmas was a rough time for me and my family, and New Year's didn't get any better. I'll explain a little bit as we go on, but it was a pretty tough time here, and we went through some struggles. Those struggles have forced us to make some decisions. So we are still going to be doing the podcast. We are still going to be bringing you guys content. That's not going to change. But there is a few other things that are going to change that I will cover here in just a little bit. So thank you guys for all the support. Continue hitting the like button, the subscribe button, and make sure you guys ring notification bells so you guys get notified when I go live, which is at 1 p.m. Central every Saturday. So we're going to keep that time pretty much locked down. Again, guys, make sure you guys hit the like buttons and hit the subscribes. It really does help the channel. Let's go ahead and start digging into some of the topics. Oh, I got to switch something up here for you guys. If I don't get my connection set right, you guys won't be able to get in here. So I got to make sure I set this up right. Make sure I'm on the right one. Okay. All right, we should be set, guys. All right, so let's start off with kind of what's been going on over the last month or so since I took my season break. I usually take my season break just before the Christmas season. That is time that I spend with my family, and we get to do the stuff that we want to do for the holidays. So I took that time off. And through that time in between the holiday season, I had an injury. That injury changed how everything's going to play about for me, at least on the back end side of things, with not only the channel, but with my future and my current job situations. Yes, the injury happened while I was at my main job. So because it happened at my main job, I've had to go through some work comp stuff. I've had to go through a whole bunch of crazy stuff. Actually, I've had to change jobs, unfortunately. So that's really changed kind of my outlook and kind of helped me make some decisions that you guys are about to see here shortly. Sunrise Ashley, hi, good to have you here in the chat. Emmy's World, sorry to hear that. Yeah, it happens. You know, we all try to go and do our jobs as safely as possible. Unfortunately, I had an injury. That injury is forcing me to reevaluate a lot of things in my life. And safety has to be one of the higher things that I need to push for the future. It's not only for my sake, but as I'm showing you guys these projects, I need you guys to be safe too. I don't ever want to show you guys something that is not safe and then you guys try to reduplicate that and you guys get hurt. I would feel bad. So usually I will always try to bring the safety side before I bring in the projects, such as, you know, sometimes there's cut hazards, sometimes there's issues with things falling off of jack stands. Jasper Football, hi, good to have you. Hillary, Emily, do you have a job right now? Yes, well, I'm still, as of this week, I'm still employed with the current employer. I will be leaving them due to the issues with how I've been treated during the injury. That change has now brought about a really good opportunity where I get to work closer to home, meaning we're going to be making some changes. You guys knew about Malibu Steel. What you guys didn't know about what happened with Malibu Steel, I hit a deer with it. And I'll show you guys that damage in just a little bit. That deer hit's going to bring out some interesting stuff that we're going to be doing with this project. I'm going to show you guys how to do these repairs really easily in your own garage or in your own driveway to where you don't necessarily have to take it to a repair shop. Because anytime you go to a body shop and any repair shop right now, prices are jacked up. They're extremely high. So anything we can do to save money is what we need to do. Emmy, that's great. Cat Lover 16, do you get PPL on your stream? I tried and I can't get. Not quite sure what that is. If that's, I know I have monetization set up, so I should be getting super chats and stuff. Emmy's World, thumbs up. Yeah. So, it's people. I do try to bring guests on. I haven't had that much around me where I live to really bring guests on. I do want to try to integrate some of that in. So I'm going to be reaching out to some people here in the future to see if I can get them on board with doing some chat stuff and actually getting people on, especially with the automotive content that I do. There's a lot going on in the industry right now, and there's a lot of crazy things going on in the industry. It's not just a little bit. We're noticing Dodge backtracking, and some of this I'll cover at the end when I do news. But before I do the news, I always do the Q&As. So just know that if you have any questions, save them for when I ask for Q&As, and then I'll answer your guys' questions as we go on. We do have some projects to do. I'm going to break down exactly what's going on with the fleet of vehicles we've got and kind of what we're looking at now for the future because of my force in being able to change jobs. So I will have to change what I'm doing for my daily work. YouTube's not my main gig. I do this as a side thing to give you guys education, show you guys tricks and tips, help you guys out with your little projects or whatever you have going on. Now, sometimes they can snowball into big projects. They do. And this one back here is a prime example of a big project that's snowballing out of control. We will be getting into that vehicle today, and I will be showing you guys some of the stuff that we got going on. I'll also be doing some of the repairs live right here. So let's cover the fleet. We still got Champagne Bubbles. Champagne Bubbles is having a problem with the engine. We're burning a lot of oil. We have now entered into the oil consumption test through Kia. This oil consumption test is to test whether or not the oil piston rings have failed. If they have, we are in the territory of potentially them having to put a new motor in this car. And for how many miles are on it, they need to put a new motor in it because we're not going to do it. The only reason I'm not going to, we bought the car brand new with a warranty for a reason. I didn't want that car to have extensive mechanical work. I don't have a hoist here. So I don't really want to have to try to lift a car off of its motor in a garage. Again, if we were to talk about safety, definitely not the safest way to go to try to change a motor in a garage without a hoist, especially newer cars because everything has to come out the bottom. Your motor, transmission, and the bottom carriage frame drops straight out when you change out a motor. That's how they work. That's why they've become so expensive to fix. Oftentimes, they're not worth the repair. So if you shell out a motor or wreck a transmission, it's not worth the cost to drop that motor out and change it out because it usually will total out the value of the car. It's more than likely what goes on with that situation. So, Champagne Bubbles, we're having engine troubles. Crimson Vortec, we went through and we did in the alignment right here that you guys saw. Here to find out, I didn't have accurate measurements from the place I got my alignment tools from. That means that alignment was way off. That alignment being off changed a lot of different stuff. It made it to where I had to decide what path I was going to take with Crimson Vortec because if I couldn't get the steering straightened out, if I couldn't get it to where it needed to be and where it was accurate, it wasn't going to be a good, reliable vehicle. We got the alignment straightened out. Let me grab the sheet. I want to show you guys that right now. So I've been keeping this around because I wanted to show you guys exactly what happened in my own garage while I was doing this alignment. And this is why sometimes the garage alignments are good enough to get it to a shop, but it's not something you should drive it long term because you could damage or chew up tires. And that's exactly what would have happened in the case of Crimson Vortec had I just used the quick trick alignment tools. I don't knock what they do, but if their database is not accurate, you can't get a good alignment. And that's exactly what happened here. So when I brought it in, there was some definite issues with the way that it was set up. I was able to get some stuff figured out, but all of my caster and camber were way off. So here's what we had. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to flip this camera around because it's backwards for you guys right now. So I'm going to flip this so you guys can see what we're talking about and I can point this out. Okay, so here we go. So this would be the left side, this would be the right side. What we have going on is we tried to set caster first. As we did, we got this side of the caster really close. It was in, this is a green area. These are the red areas on the outside. They just printed it off in black and white. That's why you guys can't tell the difference between the colors. But on the driver's side, we are way out. We are to the point that this was going to really mess up the tires. And as we looked here, you could tell that it even threw the camber off. So both cambers were actually tipped in. That's not a good thing. So those had to get corrected, but this had to get corrected before they could do this. So I hope that shows you guys kind of why the alignments are so important. And even though you buy tools online and you think that they're going to work good, that's not always the case. Sometimes the tools are only as good as the measurements that you're going off of. Had I had the right measurements, I could have done it with the tools that I had that you guys saw in the last video that we did. It'd be the last video of 2024. The alignment would have been perfect. It would have worked great if I had the right measurements, but I didn't have the right measurements. So that's what happened. We got that straightened out, and now I've been driving that one pretty much every day. But before we took that in, what you guys didn't see because I had already taken Christmas vacation was the week before Christmas, I hit a deer with Malibu steel. And we're going to take a look at that damage, but I want to cover the Silver Swine real quick. There really isn't much to update with the Silver Swine. Pretty much Toyota 04 Toyota Tacoma, completely done. Nothing really to worry about. So it's already done. I don't have to really think about that. We are going to dig that back out of storage, and we are going to have some more seat time with that truck this year. I do plan on doing a few things with it. I would like to get a tonneau cover if it allows. I would like to get seat covers done on that vehicle. I would like to go with cat skin and have a complete leather interior put in that vehicle, heated and cooled leather seats. So that is something that we are looking at for the future for the Silver Swine. Let's get on to Malibu steel. What's going on with it, and why am I saying the lineup's going to change? The lineup's going to change because now that I work really close to home for my new job, I don't need this car. Yes, it gets 31 miles to the gallon after everything we did to it, but I don't need it. And if I don't need it, there's no point in it sitting around and not really getting driven. So for the future, once this car gets sold, once we fix the damage from the deer hit, this vehicle is going to get sold. I'm going to move on and keep focusing on the main three that I got and working on customer vehicles. So the one behind me over here is a customer. That one's a Buick Encore. We're going to be covering that in just a little bit. Let's go ahead and take a look at the damage that basically happened from the deer hit. So this was a pretty big hit. And although it didn't do a tremendous amount of damage, it did enough to make me go, okay, I need to fix this thing. And I can't just turn around and resell it the way it is. So I'm gonna bring you guys down just a bit so you guys can see the bumper a little bit better. You guys are already seeing a piece missing right down here. So when I hit the deer, I hit it square right here. Its back hip hit here. I flipped the deer up and it bounced off the windshield. So it could have blown out the windshield, it could have destroyed the hood, but all that happened was the front bumper got cracked really bad. It broke some of the grill pieces that you guys are seeing here, and it did a lot of damage to the painted bumper cover. It also broke a bracket underneath this headlight. Now, it might have broken the headlight too, so I got different headlights for this car that I'm going to swap out and put the different headlights in it. I'm going to put the new bracket in here to fix this. We're going to get a pre-painted bumper to replace the bumper cover that's wrecked, and we bought new grill inserts. The badge is still good, and I'm going to go ahead and replace the license plate cover because there was already a crack in it prior to this incident. I can give you guys a little bit more info, but I want to show you guys a close-up on the car first. All right, so here's the close-up of how much damage was actually sustained from the deer hit. So, cracked this bumper up really bad. These are broken in several places. This one's almost completely destroyed. That piece snapped out because that piece should look like that one right there. This bottom grill did not take any damage down here. But this one, and the bumper cover all took pretty big damage. Oh, all right. Grab something to drink quick, and then we're going to cover kind of what my plans are with this car and how I plan on fixing it. Because when you guys have something like this, you're going to want to know, how can I go about fixing the car? You know, if the car's still in good shape, let's just say it was only the bumper cover that got damaged. You're not going to want to throw away a car that's in good shape just because you had a small deer hit. And yes, I'm saying this is a small hit because the damage that's done is surface level. It didn't damage the subframe. It didn't damage anything underneath that bumper cover other than the bracket for the headlight. This is a really simple deer hit repair. Sometimes they might just hit a fender and you can get a color matched fender to replace on the vehicle. And honestly, that's the best way to go. If you can get pre-painted parts that match your vehicle, that's the cleanest way to do a repair. It saves you time at the paint shop. You don't have to pay for paint. Also, it saves you on the amount of labor that you're going to have because it cuts down all that paint prep, all the paint work, all the paint cost. So, how did I get a bumper cover for this car at a very reasonable rate? Simple. I went on eBay, and eBay had a pre-painted bumper cover already ready to match this car based on my paint code. So, all I need to do is go on there, order out those parts, and get them here. Once they're here, I'll be good to go. Make sure you guys hit the like button, hit the subscribe buttons, guys. This really does help the channel and helps us grow. We're coming back this year with a lot of content. So one of our big projects coming up after I do this project here today is we're going to be working on getting this one apart, making sure there's no other stuff damaged underneath. And I'm going to get these parts ordered up for this car. My goal is to get this sold during tax season. So in the next 2 months, I'd like to get this thing sold. In order to do that, I need to fix that damage. Not only will it hurt the value of the car when I go to sell it, but it's always better to sell a car that looks in good shape and runs great than it does to try to sell something that looks kind of busted up, even though it might run really well. You're going to take a hit when you sell it, at least on the private side. So in order to fix that, the best way to do it is to fix the damage. If we're going to go in it, we're going to get after it and we're going to get it fixed. So that's a rundown of what's going on. You guys are now caught up. It's been a pretty tough about month and a half for me and my family, but we are pushing through and we're going to keep bringing you guys content. So my injury will limit a little bit of what I'm capable of doing. Like there's certain things my shoulder just won't let me do anymore. I will show you guys creative ways to work through some injuries. When you guys do have to work on your own stuff, there's a lot we can do with repair that sometimes we don't have to take it in. Sometimes we don't need to do the shop repair cost. I usually would always reserve the repair shop stuff for stuff that was very hard to do, very buried and very difficult to get at. Oftentimes needing a hoist or needing specialty tools that I did not have. That's about the only time I would ever rely on a repair shop if I could do it myself. Having the tools does make the difference. So having a good scanner, making sure you check everything over, make sure that everything's clean, putting things back together in the proper order. That's what I really want to teach you guys here, is how to do that stuff so that you guys can see exactly how that stuff goes about. If you guys got any questions on kind of the past month vehicle situation, chat those questions in separately right now. Don't text in your automotive questions yet. I always save that for the end along with the news. For today, we're going to go ahead and dig into this Buick Encore. What's going on with the Encore? Well, I'll give you guys a brief rundown of what's been going on with this car. I can't go into exact specifics, but this car came to a customer of mine because there was an issue with the person not making payments on the vehicle. So my customer took the vehicle back. When they took it back, they didn't realize all the damage that was done to this vehicle and how neglected this car was during that time that they had it. So within a very short 3-4 months of no payments being made, the car was driven and no maintenance was done on the car. This put everything into a whole tailspin with this car. So this thing started pulling codes that were related to the valve cover, started pulling codes related to a misfire on cylinders. So today we're going to go ahead and pull the coil packs out. We're going to pull the spark plugs. We're probably going to pull the valve cover and get those items replaced and put back in. Once we put those back in, we'll be able to hook up the new battery that we had to have installed because the old one was over 5 years old and really wasn't safe enough to run. It was already having a hard time starting in somewhat cold weather, and we've got a lot more cold weather coming. I did not want to leave this for my customer to call me up and say, hey, my battery's dead now. Yeah, I don't live that far from my customer, but sometimes I'm not always around to run the jump pack over to start it. So it's better to put in a good battery right off the bat. So we got the new battery sitting in there. I'll cover the battery real quick with you guys. It's pretty basic. 10mm socket, 13mm socket, 2 6-inch extension, and a ratchet is all you're going to need to change out this battery. Very basic to get in there and do it. We're going to cover that, and then I'm going to show you guys where the coil packs are located. We're going to start digging into those coil packs. Okay, I see that you guys didn't have any questions on some of the stuff about what's been going on in the last month or so. So we'll go ahead and get flipped around here and get into this. All right, so here we are. Let's start with the battery because that's what I told you guys I would do. Here's the battery. So on the Buick Encore, this is a 2017 Buick Encore, and it is the all-wheel drive version. The battery is located here. Your ground is here. Your positive is back here. So make sure that you get these located right and in the right position before you put any of these wires on. You could wind up frying a computer if you mix them up and put them in backwards. A lot of vehicles won't even let you do that because the cables are only so long on purpose. It's designed that the battery is to sit in the position that it's in. If I lifted this up and twisted it all the way around, these cables wouldn't reach. So oftentimes it would keep you from accidentally putting the positive on the negative and negative on the positive. If you do that, you will fry a battery. Hulk, hi there. Hi, good to have you here on this Saturday. So the tie down goes into here, comes across the battery, goes down into there. The bolt lays down in there. So what it is here is my bracket. And I think the bolt is on the bench. So what it is the bolt goes through here, pinches down on the battery, and that's your battery hold down. This is a good setup. I don't like that it sometimes cuts into the plastic up here. So if you got bare metal here, what you could do is put a little piece of rubber around it, like a tire or inner tube. That will keep you from cutting into the battery. But from factory, they never did any of that. They just left it be, so we're not going to really mess with that today. But this is changing out the battery, pretty basic. What we're going for, though, here's where a lot of our issues have been. A lot of our codes are tied to an exhaust leak that is related to a first line catalytic converter that lays down there and a pipe that goes back. The other part that we're having issues with, this valve cover is not sealed properly. This is a plastic valve cover. I would never recommend using this valve cover. They make a metal upgraded one that we will be using today. But before we do that, we're going to pull our coil packs off. I've already taken this cover off, and how that cover is held on there is these clips. So right here in the front, they're just snapped in. You take a screwdriver and you pop these up, and then you can take that screwdriver from the back side and access these C-clip styles and just lightly press up. That's how that cover comes off. Pretty basic, nothing too crazy with that. But now we're going to go for this coil pack, and the coil pack, there's a wire that we had to disconnect. That wire is already disconnected right here. And the connector is here. So I'm not sure if this one's broken. We're going to have to look at this in the future. Hulk, I had a question regarding the engine oil dipstick reading. When I check it on cold engine, it's always between the high and low mark. I think is that okay, or should I top up? Here's the thing. You don't ever want your engine to be starved of oil. It's always good to be closer to the top of the mark. And I can show you guys on this dipstick, actually. Let me just pull this out and wipe this one quick. So, good question, Hulk. So, on this one here, as soon as it auto focuses, sometimes these cameras are a pain. Okay, so this one here, you have marks on this one. So these hash marks down here mean that it would be low. Hash marks up here means that it's near the full mark. If you were anywhere in between here, I would try to bring it up in between these hash marks here. The reason why you want to keep it closer to full is as the engine starts pulling oil from the oil pan, it's going to pull that oil out and bring it to the top of the engine, meaning that you're going to be a little low on oil by doing it that way. So let's say you were at the bottom of these hash marks, or you're barely at the add portion of this mark. If you're barely at the add, when the motor's running, you could be sucking that oil down even farther because it's not full. Here's something to know. I'm not sure what kind of vehicle you got, but if you have a Kia Soul, you need to check it after it's sat for 20 minutes. Some vehicles have a time limit. Usually I like to let them sit for at least 15 before I check the oil level. If you check it after it's ran after that 15 minutes, that's where your oil level should be. So I wouldn't check it right after you've ran it, because sometimes it hasn't flown back down. But if you check it after the 15 minutes of it sitting after running, and you're down here, you should probably add. I would try to aim for these up here. Aim for this full area up here. So I hope that answers your question there, Hulk. So now that we've got this connector unplugged, like I said, there might be an issue that this connector might be bad because this piece came out of the connector. This is not normal. We shouldn't have pieces breaking off of the connectors. So this might be something I might recommend that to my customer, that we get a new connector. If we go through and do some of this maintenance stuff and we're still having the misfire, I'm going to point to that if the plugs look good. But we're going to know that here real soon. And how we're going to know the shape of the plugs is we're going to use our torque bits to take this off. So there's 2 screws, and these are torque screws that hold down our coil pack. The simple thing is to start with the coil packs and the plugs. Anytime you're doing a tune-up or you have a misfire, sometimes it can be on a specific cylinder, sometimes it can be a random. But usually I always start with doing the basics of a tune-up. And the reason I start with... Somebody's been in here. The reason I start with the basics is then I can eliminate a lot of problems. And by us inspecting the spark plugs, we can gauge the condition of the engine. And that's exactly what we're going to do here. My concern is this coil pack was not bolted down tight. I'm going to show you guys something on this coil pack that tells us that that could have been a misfire problem. Also, we're going to want to look at this coil pack when we pull it out. Okay, here's our coil pack. So we have grounding points on these coil packs, and they usually come right through the ground bolts. This bolt was barely touching, meaning that it wasn't actually grounding properly. This grounding could made a misfire within this. This is a pretty heavy setup, but here's the thing. We're not going to reuse this coil. Once we pull these out, I'm not going to reuse it because this car has over 100,000 miles on it. It is better to replace this. Usually coil packs are about every 100,000 along with the plugs. That's about the time to do it. Hulk said, I have a Hyundai Sentra Petrol 1.5. Okay, so you're dealing with a smaller size engine. So yes, I would make sure that it's topped off or close to. You don't have to be, don't ever go over. If you go over that oil, you could wind up having the crankshaft smash against the oil in the oil pan. So don't ever overfill. You're better off to be a little lower, like I was saying. You're better off being a little lower on this dipstick than to try to overfill this, because if you overfill this, there's a high likeliness that that crank could smash against the oil in the bottom of the oil pan. So now we're going to go for spark plugs here. And usually I like to take a look down in there, make sure there's no dirt or debris before I start pulling spark plugs, because I don't want to knock any dirt in there when I take these out. If I think there's a lot of dirt or debris, what I'll do is I'll take my shop vac and I'll just put them over the holes, and I'll pull that dirt out with the shop vac. Yeah, no problem, Hulk. I hope that answers your question. Like I said, most of the time, it's better to play it a little cautious and not overfill it, but you definitely don't want to be down into the ad, because at ad you're potentially starving the engine of oil, especially under high rev situations. So like you're merging in and out of traffic and you're accelerating hard. Somebody was in this engine and I'm not happy about it. So the reason I say this is these plugs are coming out really loose. So somebody thought they were going to do a garage tune-up on their own. And when they did that, they did not torque down the spark plugs. So this could be causing a misfire issue. Also, with the coil pack not being packed down tight, we could be having an issue. So here's our plug. little concerning here. The reason I'm saying concerning is this plug is really wet on the end of it. Usually this could mean unburnt fuel. There's a way to test that by smelling the plug. And it's very raw fuel, meaning that it wasn't burning the fuel properly. I hope that it hasn't washed down the cylinder for my customer. If you wash down a cylinder, what can happen is you wind up pushing fuel down into the engine, past the rings, running too rich. Yes, thanks, Hall. Exactly. Running too rich. That's what this condition is. So the fact that this has raw fuel on the end of it, I can see it, I can smell it, that's not good. Is that a iridium plug? Yes, these are iridium plugs. We have to run the iridium in pretty much any newer vehicle. We don't have a choice on that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take them and I'm going to pull them out and I'm going to set them in the order that I'm pulling them out of the cylinder. I'm not going to worry about putting new ones in yet because I want to see what all of these plugs look like before I start putting the new ones in. If I have a problem with the cylinder, I can always stop because I don't want to cost my customer a bunch of money if it isn't going to fix the problem. This plug is sticky. I don't like sticky plugs because they can strip threads. So these engines will throw codes based on a part inside the valve cover. That part inside the valve cover can create basically a vacuum leak, and it's related to it not sealing the valve cover. It's allowing the gases to pull out. It's a bunch of stuff with EGR and all of that that just makes it a big mess. So here's the next plug. This one's not as wet, so we don't have nearly as wet of a plug on this one. Again, we have a bunch of dirt and debris on here, so I'm going to be careful putting the new stuff back in. All right, so we're 2 down, 2 to go. We had one really wet plug that was showing a misfire. And it was misfiring on cylinder number 1. So that tells me that the plug was wet, the plug was loose, and that we had a misfire. So that cylinder was not sparking. Again, that would point to a bad coil pack. It would also point to a possible bad connector. This one is wet as well. So we had some misfiring here. And for how wet it is, it was just as wet as cylinder number 1. Definitely smells like I dipped it in gasoline. So running too rich. And it's running rich because we're not sparking. We're not getting ignition. Almost perfect tan color. Yes, on the second plug, yes. Perfect tan color, that looked good. It was aged, like it's been in there a while, but it was not completely messed up. These other 2 that were soaking wet, that's not good. Soaking wet means that it's not burning the fuel. 1 and 3 wet plugs. Yep, that's what we got so far. Hulk, you're doing a good job. I'm gonna move you up. All right, everybody, welcome Hulk as a new mod to the channel. He's been doing pretty good here in the chat, actively engaging. I want to show my support to people who are supporting me. So thank you Hulk. And this one's loose. So this one was not tightened down like it should have been. So we had 1 and 4 are loose. 1 and 3 are drenched in fuel. And what does 4 look like? Four has fuel on it. I can see it. It's wet. Smells like raw fuel. So this tells me that somebody knew that there was a fuel issue on this car. The fact that the plugs were not torqued down properly tells me somebody else was in here. Yeah, no problem, Hulk. Thank you. This tells me somebody else was in this engine. Hulk, just so you know, I do this every Saturday at 1 p.m. Central. That's when I go live. I do take a little bit of time off sometimes throughout the year, usually around the holiday season. So this is actually my first time back since the Christmas break. So, all right. So now I got to make a decision. Do I put the plugs in, put the coil pack in, only to turn around and take the valve cover off and replace it? Or do I just replace the valve cover? This is where knowing the vehicle and its situation will help you decide if you want to make a deeper dig into a vehicle's engine. You want to know that your repair is going to be successful and that you don't have to go back in. We know that there's an issue with the valve cover because it's throwing an engine code related to the valve cover. So I know that this is some issue. It's not related to the misfire issue. And off of what I saw off of my connector might be some of my problem with this misfire. And if it becomes too much more of an issue, I will be digging into it. Only plug number 2 was good. Okay, sure, I will try to join in. Thanks, Hulk. Yeah, only number 2 was good. Everything else either was wet or loose. We had a loose plug on 1, loose plug on 4, wet on 1, wet on 3, wet on 4. Now, the wetness on 4 was not that bad. So, it wasn't super bad yet, but plug 4, to me, raises the biggest question. So, whenever I change plugs, I always try to find the things that are standing out that are weird. The fact that the threads are clean on 4, even though it was loose, while number 3 was wet and has brown stain on it from being in the head, this plug looks new to me. This tells me somebody's been in this engine. The fact that the coil pack was not torqued down properly also tells me somebody was in this engine. Hulk, I wonder how durable would a plastic valve cover be in the long run? It's not. And that's why whenever I have a chance, I go online. Let me grab it for you guys. I'm going to spoil some things here. One guess, guys. What is that? The plugs are actually Champions or AC Delcos, and I'm replacing them with AC Delcos. Yes, this is a one-piece aluminum valve cover. We will not have issues with this thing cracking. We will not have issues with this thing leaking or pulling vacuum or anything weird away from this valve cover. When this is bolted down tight, according to the specs, this will not leak. The only way it could leak is if the seals go bad, and this uses stock seals. So we could use stock gaskets, but have the upgraded aluminum valve cover. This is why you guys tune into me, because I will show you guys this kind of stuff. I will get into finding parts that allows us to fix our vehicles to where it'll save us money in the long run. Plus, we won't have the same issues. So we're actually fixing things ahead of time. Making sure we don't have to go back in later on. This kit also came with new bolts and new seals. So we've got new gaskets. I didn't have to buy anything other than the valve cover to fix this. Oh, plus it looks good. Yeah, this one actually looks pretty good. They did a nice job painting it nice and red. If I chose not to put the cover back on, it wouldn't be the end of the world. I haven't decided if I'm going to snap that Ecotech cover back on. I might just not bother, but we'll see. So I'm looking at the valve cover, and I'm also looking at where I need to remove some stuff. So we have a wire harness back here that has a bunch of wires in it. These are tied to the valve cover, so I got to carefully move these out of the way without pulling or pushing these and damaging them. I don't want to damage wires, so everything's being done carefully and slowly. Okay. So there's a channel that runs along here that has wiring in it. I'm gonna have to contend and fight with that, but I'm ready now. I could probably go ahead and start pulling my bolts for that valve cover. Now this takes a star socket. These will take a very special socket, a star shape, in order to remove these bolts. This one would be the, it's like a torque socket. They call this one the E10. I believe that's what it is. So there it is. That's the one we're using. Does the beauty cover restrict airflow during summers? No, it's all under hood, so it ain't gonna really matter. The beauty cover is more or less just that. Some vehicles, the beauty cover is part of the air intake tube system, meaning that it pulls through that stupid cover. That one right there does that. So this one is a prime example of how the beauty cover cannot be tossed to the side. So next week, guys, we will be digging into this, and we'll be getting this front bumper off. But this cover is tied into our intake. We can't take that out. We can't change it. It has to stay. We could put an intake system on it, such as a cold air intake, but we could run a different intake setup. But again, we're looking at a lot more cost, a lot more time. And for me, since I'm planning on selling this car, I'm not going to stick too much into it going forward. But yeah, if it's not tied into the intake system and it's just a silly cover like this, if it doesn't look good, we don't have to put this on the new one. And I'm looking to see if there's even, yeah, there's a spot to put this in. So we can put this cover on here. It does snap on to the aftermarket valve cover, but we don't have to put it on there if we don't want. Okay. So what I'm doing is just outfitting everything to start pulling these bolts. And the reason we're doing this, guys, is we had a check engine related to valve cover, And we had misfires on certain cylinders. So that's what's prompted us to do this repair. Again, there's a lot more issues with this, but hopefully this will correct a lot of the other issues that we're having by changing this. And I can tell where it's been leaking and oil has been running past the valve cover. So it's time to do this. Now, I'm going to pause right here because I'm glad I caught this and I stopped myself. Doing this is a huge no-no. What do we have that's not covered right now? If I took this bolt loose, what could happen? I'll give you guys a chance to answer quickly. If I took that bolt off on the inside, after what I just did, what could happen? Okay. To answer that question, we took spark plugs out, but we didn't put the new ones back in. If I take these bolts loose on the inside, what can happen is we'll drop those bolts down inside there, and without having spark plugs covering the hole, what can happen is we could drop a bolt directly in the engine, which would cause us to have to tear that entire engine down or try go fishing through the engine to find the bolt. We could not fire this engine until we got that bolt out of there, because if we did, we would damage the engine. So in order to not let that happen, this is the smartest thing to do. Put your new plugs back in. Don't continue until you get these holes covered, because leaving them open could potentially damage the engine. Whenever it comes to doing stuff with spark plugs, always, if you're going to pull the plugs out, put the new ones in right away. So I'm not torquing them, I'm just putting them in lightly. We're going to torque them at the end, and those will be at 18 foot-pounds. Is usually where the torque spec is on them. Sometimes I go to 16 if I think that the heads feel a little soft on the aluminum. I'll go to 16. But yeah, never leave them open like that. Yep, and the bolt would end up on top of the piston, correct. That's exactly what would happen. By not covering these and putting these back in before we take this valve cover out, we could drop a bolt right on top of the piston. And if we don't get it out and we fired it up, we would actually damage the engine and destroy this engine. One bolt will destroy an engine if it lands on top of the piston. That's all it needs. Just one bolt will destroy an engine. So I've always made it a rule of mine, if plugs come out, plugs go back in. And I usually do one at a time to make sure that nothing drops in the cylinder. Because then when it comes out, I can just simply put the next one in and just keep moving forward like that. The reason I did it this way is I wanted to show you guys in sequence what was going on with this engine. So for me, I kind of stepped out of pattern or sequence. So I didn't put the new plugs in right away, and I was getting ready to pull this valve cover, which is a huge no-no. Whenever you're doing stuff like this, it's better to be in a routine that you can trust and know that everything's put back together properly. I thank you guys for all the support. We're just coming back here on our new season 2025. And we do these live, pretty much podcasts all the time, every Saturday at 1 p.m. Central. Each week is a new topic, so I'm always finding new topics to do and new projects. We do have a project coming up on Crimson Vortec, which is our 01 GMC Jimmy. That's the one that I had the alignment done on. We have to do the pitman arm, the one that's located on the gearbox. So that's the next project that we're going to have to do. So I've ran this down just hand tight with this. I'm not going to get too carried away because we're going to torque them at the end. Now I can safely go at these bolts and not worry if I accidentally drop one. Ideally, I don't want to do that. I don't want to drop a bolt. But I can now take the time to spin these all loose and then start taking them out one by one. I've seen people drop extensions and sockets down inside there. You wouldn't believe what will fall down those holes once they're open. And because of that, I always try to make sure that I get them closed up as quickly as possible anytime I'm dealing with an open cylinder situation. Some of these are a little looser, probably because the gasket is wore out. Some of these are a little tighter, but they're definitely not snugged down to where I would feel comfortable with where they're at. So it's probably a good thing we're doing this valve cover, knowing that there's a current issue with this. Okay, so the socket just fell off. Had I not put those plugs back in, I could have easily knocked the socket down inside the cylinder. It just shows how quickly stuff can happen. I was just going to take it off of the bolt and it hooked my hose and my hand caught it before it fell down towards the cylinder. So again, it's the little things and the little details and the patterns that you get into when doing repairs that will ultimately determine if you're successful or if you have a bad repair. Getting a good routine down when doing projects like this really does help. It does make a huge difference. Now I'm going to go and pull all of these out one by one. And out of the stock valve cover, these might not come out. So there might be O-rings and stuff holding the bolts in. So all you do is just run it until they're loose and you can pick them up and they'll stay inside the valve cover. I never like to trust that they're going to stay in the valve cover. I've had ones that somebody had already taken it apart and they broke it to where the bolt will pop out. I've had them fall in, into the head in a weird place. I've had to fish bolts out of heads. So that's why I try to take the time to take this stuff all loose before I'm going to try popping and pulling this thing in any direction. I want to make sure every bolt is out and loose and not on anything. If the gasket is worn out, then there should be a trace of oil around the head gasket. Yeah, and you're also going to notice, like, this is just a valve cover, so it's not the head gasket, but you do see a little bit of oil residue across the front of this where there wouldn't necessarily be oil being dripped onto it. So because we see that oil residue, we know it's leaking. So I got 2 more bolts left. 2 or 3, I think 3. I got 2 left. We also have a weird clip on the front of this, and I can show you guys on the other valve cover. Now I have to get a clip, and I'll show you guys what I'm talking about here. This one also has a piece that snaps into the front of this cover. So I'm going to need to get these clips up. It's part of the wiring harness. Okay, so right over here on this side, there is this harness that runs through the valve cover. Right here, this harness has to get moved off of the valve cover. And then we've got to move the other wire harness and this hose off to the side before we pull this valve cover out. While tightening up these bolts, is there a pattern to follow? There can be, and I will show you guys what that pattern is once we start the reassembly process. Sometimes that pattern is pretty simple, that you just start from the center and work your way out in a cross pattern. Other ones are a little bit more complicated, but we will cover that here shortly. Just want to make sure I can get this off of here before I pull this valve cover up out of here. Okay, now that I got that harness loose, what I want to do is take and set this all off to the side away from this valve cover. So when I pull this valve cover, I can pull it straight up. I'm also going to check to make sure there's no debris on the valve cover that could wind up falling into the engine. And that all wire harnesses are out of the way the best that I can. All right. So now we got to begin prying this off. Sometimes if we can start a corner, we can pry it up on a corner. Really stuck on there. The last thing we want to do is take a hammer and start hitting around in here, because a hammer could actually damage the wiring harnesses, or we could accidentally hit a different connector that we could destroy a connector. So what we try to do is find safe places to pry on the valve cover that we're not going to damage anything else. We're not so concerned about the valve cover itself at this point, but we don't want to damage anything else in the engine bay. There we go. We heard that nice little pop. That means that it came loose. Right now we're just trying to wiggle it to get the gasket free, and then we'll be able to pick the gasket out. Okay, so here it is. We pulled it. A lot of sludge on the backside. I'll show you guys here shortly. So this tells me somebody didn't do their oil changes like they were supposed to. And while we're in here, we're going to look at a couple of different things. We're going to look at our cam lobes. We want to make sure our cam lobes are not wore off. We're also going to want to clean off of all of our gasket material. So all of this gasket has to come off. This gasket is definitely old. You can feel how brittle this gasket is. And I'm starting to see a spot where they might have had a potential oil leak. This also has to do with the EGR system. I'll show you guys that here in just a bit. So here we go. Let's get a closer look inside this engine bay. I feel safe enough putting the camera over this because I kind of know that nothing will fall off this camera. So around here is a setup for your EGR right here. So oil is right here. If you have a leak on this gasket, you're going to leak right into your EGR system and it's going to pull oil in, meaning that you're going to have oil consumption. What we also want to do is check all of our crank and cam journals. Make sure that these are all in good shape. We don't want any of our lobes on our cam to have grind marks in it. If it did, I would advise my customer to not keep this car very long based on if I saw grind marks. Now I am seeing a little bit of concern right here on this journal and right here on this one. With my fingernail, I can lightly feel a little bit going on with that. Now some of this might have been from them not doing proper oil changes and it getting sludged up. If that's what happened, then my customer is going to have to deal with the fallout of people just not doing proper maintenance on their vehicle. So what we want to do next is we want to get everything wiped up in there. We want to get everything clean. So we're going to do that by carefully, with clean rags, wiping around the edge where it's going to sit. So we're going to want to wipe the mating surface, and we want to get it as clean as possible so that the new gasket seals. We don't want to get paper towel down in there, so be careful as you're wiping. Lots of sludge in this engine. This is from trying to extend your oil changes way too long. That's what causes this. Would you clean all the sludge with petrol? No, I wouldn't do that because it could contaminate the oil. At this point, what I do is I run an engine oil treatment, like an engine oil flush, and I try to flush as much of that stuff out as I can. Once I've done that, I'll do a fresh oil change, and then I recommend that the customer runs a full synthetic oil, but changes the oil every 3,000 miles for the first 2 or 3 oil changes. Then they could go to 4 or 5,000. I don't go past 5,000 on any oil change at all. No matter if it's synthetic or not, I don't go past 5,000. Okay, oil flush. Yeah, definitely. If you've got sludge in your engine, don't try to wipe it out or pour gas or anything in there. You could damage components. You could wash down bearings, cause the engine to fail. The best is to just run an engine oil flush, which you do in your garage before you change your oil. You'll put it in the engine, run the engine sometimes for a half hour, and then you'll shut the engine down and drain the oil. Okay, so I'm seeing a spot where they put a little bit of silicone in. We're going to reduplicate that. I'm going to have to clean this silicone off. But what they did was this front cover is a split piece. So you would have to pull this valve cover if you were going to do these cams. So if you had to replace the cam phaser or the chain or the guides, you would have to pull this cover off anyway. This has a front cover on it. So here and down here, they put silicone that when you press the gasket down, it seals that and doesn't have an engine oil leak there. If you do not reduplicate that, if you do not clean that silicone off and just put the new gasket on it, it's going to leak right there. So it's better to take a scraper, scrape that off, clean it off really well, but don't drop any of that stuff down inside the engine. Because it's right up here next to your valves, it could get down into that valve train. So I'm going to finish wiping and then I will get my gasket scraper because I don't know if there's a few other spots that I'll need to clean up as well. So I just do this before I begin doing that. And again, when I scrape, I'm going to be scraping away from the engine. I don't want to scrape into the engine. So you can use something like this, or I've even used wood chisels or wood awls. Those work really good because they stay sharp and you can scrape really well with them. So what I'm doing here is I'm scraping away from the engine, just pushing it off to the back of the engine so it's not going to fall down in there. I don't want any debris from this silicone getting inside this engine. And once I've got that, I'm going to check any other surfaces if I need to do some scraping because there's carbon buildup or oil. There's one spot along that intake valve that I want that to seal up tight. So taking my time there. This is where that intake piece is that we talked about. This is where you would get that engine code. So that engine code is directly tied to this port, probably sucking in oil when it shouldn't be. That's a sign that the gasket's gone bad. Okay, so now that I got that all cleaned, we're going to do one last wipe. I'm going to use a clean rag, not one that has stuff on it. I don't want to drop anything in the engine. You're going to go through probably a roll of paper towels with this job. I just use the blue shop towels. Everybody knows what those look like. I'll show you guys the roll here in a second when I grab a new one. And this isn't a final, like I'm saying, I'm not going to scrape if I don't see a spot. Like if I see a spot that it's sticking up and I don't like it, I will go back in, scrape it clean, and then swap out for a new towel. So blue shop towels. We usually go through a roll of these every project. I don't take sponsors, but honestly, that would be one I would consider for how much I use blue shop towels. It's crazy how much I use. But when it comes to doing anything with open engine, cleanliness is always the best policy. The cleaner, the better. Okay, I got one spot that's really troublesome for me to reach. So with this project, a lot of people would have taken and pulled the wire harness out of the way. I'm showing you guys, you don't have to always do that. If you can squeeze it in and out without pulling wire harnesses, and you're not pulling hard on the wire harnesses, sometimes it is better to do this. SoCal, good to have you in here, man. It's been a while. If you get a chance, check out the beginning of the video. You'll be able to get caught up on what's been happening to me over the last month or so since I took Christmas break. But I'm back now for every week here for most part until late summer. But yeah, SoCal, what we're doing is just a valve cover replacement, and we're swapping the stock plastic valve cover for the upgraded aluminum one that will not leak. These vehicles have an issue with leaking valve covers, then they throw engine codes. So we're kind of punching two gremlins in the face here at the same time, as you could say. We're taking care of a problem that happens with every one of these engines with the valve covers and the check engine light associated with it. And we're also upgrading the intake, or upgrading the valve cover so it doesn't leak like that. Yep, longer lifespan, exactly. That's what we're doing here. So the only thing that will go bad in the future will be our gasket, and we can easily replace that gasket and not have to change out the valve cover. So I'm going to bring you guys over here because this is going to take me a bit. SoCal, I've been working on fixing the Falcon after putting it into the wall on the big end. Oh man, you sent it into the wall, huh? Ah, that's a bummer. I know you stuck a lot of time into that thing. Was there a mechanical failure, or was it just slippery track conditions? What was it? Yeah, that's the last one you sent. So what we're doing now is just mating this gasket down so it stays in there when I set this down. so that when we tighten it, it'll stay tight. And just so you guys know, SoCal is one of my old school mods. He's been here for quite a while. Always check the catch can. Oh man, you mean the catch can spewed oil and it? Oh man, that stinks. Yep, guys, if you decide to run an oil catch can, make sure you drain those oil catch cans. If you're going to run a breather system like I do on my street cars, because well, I don't live in California, so I don't need to worry about that. I just run a filter system, and I've already done videos on it, but I'll show you guys on the Malibu here in just a bit once I get this gasket seated. What a filter bypass would look like versus the oil catch can that SoCal is talking about. Again, I want to make sure this gasket is seated all the way down, because when I set this over the engine, I'm not going to be able to see where this gasket is seated. So if I don't have it perfect out here, it's not going to magically become perfect inside the car. Just so you guys know that. Okay, so when it's in there and it's good, you should be able to take and tip this upside down and the gasket will not fall out. If it starts falling out, you need to put a little bit of silicone on it or gasket sealer to seal it down so that it stays in when you set this in, because you are going to have to move and jostle this around a little bit to get it in there. So by making sure that it won't fall out, you're kind of saving yourself the headache once you go over the top of the engine. All right, so I want to show you guys what SoCal was talking about and how what I'm doing is different. Again, I do this on street cars because I don't need to worry about catching anything, because on a track setting, you cannot have anything dripping on the ground. For the most part, this won't drip, but this is the breather for my valve cover. When I had this hooked up, I was using about a half a quart every oil change. After hooking this filter up instead of hooking it directly to my intake, I don't use a drop of oil in this engine at all. An oil catch can does something similar where it will catch the oil and you just dump the can out. But if you forget, let's say you are in a track setting like SoCal was, that oil could get underneath the tire, cause the tire to break traction. Once that tire breaks traction, you are going to break the tires loose. And because he said he was on the big end, that means he was on the back of the track, guys. He was nearly at the shutdown lane, or nearly at or past the finish line when that happened. That means his car spun out at pretty much top speed. Our street guys don't usually have to worry about things like that. When we wipe out, we go into the ditch. That's usually how it goes for street racers. All right, so I could use black silicone on this if I wanted, or I could use high temp RTV. The reason you don't want to use a high temp RTV is this is not oil resistant, meaning this will allow oil to permeate and allow oil to slip past. You need the oil resistant. All right, sorry it took me a bit to find the right stuff here, guys. But we always try to do things the right way here. I was actually on the street. Oh, oh man. Oh, that sucks. Yeah, it can happen on the street too, I guess. You know, we never ran the oil catch cans, so we never really worried about catching the oil, but yeah. Did you actually hit something, or was it just kind of bounced off of a concrete barrier, or kind of what happened there? So we want to use oil resistant silicone, meaning that this will not get soaked with oil. This is the route to go. If we try cutting corners here and use the wrong stuff, it could come back to bite us on this valve cover. So again, always use oil resistant anytime you're dealing with valve covers and timing chain covers, because they're going to constantly be soaked in oil. Okay, it was just a little dab that I put on there, nothing too major. I did not want to get carried away. There's one other spot that I'm going to put just a little bit of what was left on my finger in those spots. And it's because it's in a corner. And corners tend to not seal very well. I'll show you guys that on the cover here shortly. Went into a K-rail. Oh, man. Well, I'm glad you're okay, because that K-rail could have hooked that car and just tore that thing to hell. So one bad thing about racing on the street, guys, is the truth is it's dangerous. No matter how you slice it, things can always happen. And usually when you least expect it. Oh, you did hook the K-rail? Oh shit, that had to tear that car up. Damn. So where we put that silicone was down in these corners right here. We also put the dab up here between the connection between the front cover and the block. So the way this works is right here you have valve cover, front timing chain cover, and the head. In between here is where you want to put that seal in so that it seals when you press this down onto it. We're ready for this to go in. Man, I'm glad you're all right. When you hook a K-rail, that can get scary real fast. So now that we're ready, everything's done. Everything looks good. We're sealed up. We're ready to place our valve cover into place. So Usually I try to duplicate the way it came out. One thing you guys are going to notice is I did not put my bolts in this cover prior to trying to move this cover down into place. The reason I did not put the bolts in it is I do not want to fight those bolts to get this cover on. So after moving things out of the way just a hair, this thing literally dropped right into perfect place. The bolt holes are, for the most part, perfectly lined up. Just a little bit of wiggling is all I need to do to get the bolts to go in perfectly. You usually get a little bit of silicone on your hand. That's all right. Clean it up as you go. If you just let this go, you're going to wind up with silicone all over everything. It's kind of like the TikToks that you guys see with anti-seize. Same thing. A little bit of anti-seize and you're literally covered in it. So now that looks like a very nice setup right there. It's clean. Everything went back together clean. So we have a really nice clean setup. SoCal, remember guys, when you use a sealant, make sure to clean it off of any extra so it doesn't get sucked into places that it's not supposed to be. Correct. If I didn't feel that this cover dropped straight in, let's say the cover slid to the side and there was silicone on the cover, if I would have gotten it onto the timing chain itself, I need to pull this all back apart, clean that all off, and redo it. I don't want silicone inside the engine. There's a little bit of silicone in spots that it absolutely has to be. That's it. Here are my new bolts with my new seals. So now I can begin placing bolts and tightening this all back up. Now this has a rubber cushion and a washer along with this star pattern nut. And as you guys know, we've already grabbed our star socket. Here is where you definitely want those spark plugs down inside this engine. Guys, had I not put the spark plugs back in and I'm putting these bolts back in, you don't understand how easy it is to drop these bolts into those holes. Even if it's by accident, it happens quickly. Right now I'm just lightly putting all the bolts in one at a time, making sure they all go in and I haven't forgotten any. I'll worry about tightening these once I get everything set into place. And I'm going to do it with just the extension and the socket at first to make sure that everything threads up straight and I don't cross thread anything. Again, you are dealing with aluminum, so cross thread is bad, bad, bad news. You know, it's something that has EGR systems running through it. We can't risk not having this thing torqued properly. Usually valve covers are about 30 to 36 foot-pounds is where they need to be. Some people go with the tight as tight method. I try to do a little bit of combination of both. If I feel that it's loose, I will do something a little bit different, but for the most part, I try to keep to the torque spec because that's how the gasket's going to last longer. If I over tighten now, the gasket could crack. If I don't go tight enough, it'll leak in the future. So it's one of those where you have to know the torque spec and then try to get as close to it as you possibly can without damaging the threads. All right, 2 left to go in, and then we can snug this up. Then I can also break out my torque wrench, and I can start torquing up my sockets, my spark plugs. Use my spark plug socket, and then the socket for the valve cover. So before I do that, I'm going to run them all down lightly with my hand. Again, the reason we're doing it by hand is if it's cross-threaded, I can stop and back it out. If I have to clean a thread, it's easier to clean it now. Plus, when we go to do the torque setting, we're not having to sit here and crank these down with the torque wrench. We can just hit each one, torque it up, and then we're done. So I'm going to work on doing this at the pattern that they're going to probably recommend. So I got one that's being a little bit stubborn, which is why we do these by hand. Okay. So pattern would be crisscross, crisscross, and then do opposite sides as you work back and forth. You don't want to just start in one corner and work your way around, because what it'll do is create uneven pressure in this valve cover. By going with this crisscross pattern, what you're going to do is take and push the center of it down and work it out flat evenly. That's the same theory that they do with head gaskets. SoCal could probably verify that with the head gaskets. It's just the way that they do it is to disperse the weight evenly across the head so that the head gasket does not leak. Again, this is not a head gasket, but it's good practice. Plus, valve cover gaskets, in my mind, can be somewhat more tricky because valve cover gaskets leak more often. I shouldn't do this, but I don't like how it's going down, so I'm going to just walk it down with the ratchet and my hand at the end of the ratchet like this. I'm not going to put a bunch of torque onto it. Just doing this to make it easier on my hand to run this down evenly. SoCal, if you're in here, do me a favor, look up the torque spec on a 1.4 liter Ecotec engine valve covered gasket. What is that torque spec? I got a feeling I know what it is. I forgot to lock it down before I went on the podcast. SoCal might not be in here. He might have jumped off. We're still trying to look it up. Again, we're doing opposite corners to torque this down evenly. We want even pressure on this valve cover. We don't want the valve cover to warp. If you just went around the outside, torqued them all down tight right away from the start, you would create uneven pressures across the valve cover that could warp an aluminum valve cover. Not only that, but this valve cover is designed to be a one-time use valve cover to where we don't ever have to do this again. So we don't want to warp this valve cover. We want to take it nice and slow, get these all ran down by hand. Conflicting info. Oh, crap. Some say 9 pounds. Some say 70. Let me verify. Okay. While he's verifying, we're going to continue running these down in the pattern. And then once he comes back, we'll set up our torque wrench and we'll tighten them down. I'm going to guess it's right around that 36. That's usually where they go with them. But the only thing that makes me a little bit different with this engine is this one has EGR stuff running through it, which is why it threw the code, because the valve cover was leaking in the front side here, which is where those EGR ports were. So that's where they might say a higher torque. I find it hard to believe it's 70 foot-pounds, maybe 70 inch-pounds. So we'll wait for him to come back with the info on that. Okay. What year and model? It is a 2017 Buick Encore. So while he's doing that, I'm just going to do a light snug on everything just to get me ready for torquing it. And what you guys are going to see is probably the pattern that I'm going to use to torque this up. Which says 71 inch-pounds, Buick says. Okay, so that's what we're going to go by. Thank you, SoCal. That was awesome. That's why I like having my mods here, guys. Anybody who helps out in the chat, helps out with, torque specs for other people who are asking questions. Those are the people I like to make my mods. So 71 inch-pounds. We're going to go ahead before I get too much more carried away. We're going to switch over to my inch-pound torque wrench. Because doing it the way I was doing it, I could very easily sail over 70 inch-pounds. So, inch-pound torque wrench. This has been a really good one. The ADT is a good brand, or ATD is a good brand. I like having ones that are adjustable, meaning if I want to calibrate this one, I can. There's a cap here on the end. And right here's how I could take and have it calibrated. All they have to do is tighten that up, and they could set the calibration on this torque wrench. Usually it's good to have your torque wrenches tested about once a year. That's usually a good rule of thumb. I got a long ways to go. Alright, so I'm going to switch back to my ratchet. I wasn't even close on that. So we're gonna get it closer so I don't have to sit here and it's actually a crazy amount of torque for a valve cover, but we're also going with the metal one, so I feel a little bit more confident in torquing these down this tight. I normally wouldn't want to do this if it would be a plastic valve cover. I would probably lean away from it. Okay, we're getting there. We got a few more bolts left to go here. Then we can start torquing all this down. Now, one nasty one that if I would have taken the intake apart, it would have been a little easier on me to get this one more bolt, but I can get it just by kind of wiggling the ratchet down into place. All right, here we go. Final torque up now on this. Doesn't that seem rather excessive? I would, under the understanding that these things have a little bit higher oil pressure to them, and the way the bolts look, there was a rubber washer underneath them. So those rubber washers will also need to be squished to a certain foot-pound. And now that you said that, I might just back it down to 50 at first and see how 50 feels. If 50 seems more reasonable, I'll leave it at 50 inch-pounds. I mean, we're not talking foot-pounds here. Foot-pounds I'd be a lot more concerned with. You know what? I think they're right. I think it is 70 because that's clicking way too easy at 50. And we're not stripping bolts out either. So I'm going to go back to 70. I'm going to leave it down one foot-pound from what the dealer has it. I know spark plugs are a crazy inch-pound as well. So if you were doing spark plugs, your spark plugs are usually about 18 foot-pounds for a spark plug because they don't want the cylinders to be blowing air by them. So usually those are about 18 foot-pounds. Sometimes I'll do it to 16 if I don't like the way the head feels, but that's another one that we're going to be torquing here as soon as I get done with this. Okay. Yeah, everything's torquing up really good. Three-step torque method, 50, 60, and 70, 71 final. Yes, correct. So Cal is right. That is how you would go about doing that to make sure that you don't over torque. Not only that, but you're also going to go back over all of your bolts to make sure they're at the right torque. Don't just run a one torque setup and then think you're good, because you could miss a bolt by accident that doesn't get torqued. And then you have, that one will start leaking on you. And some of these will loosen up as you start torquing other bolts too. Just like I'm noticing on my inside ones here where the spark plugs go, these are loosening up as I torque on the outside. So I'm having to come back in and retorque the center ones as I go. Okay, so I'm all the way around. I'm going to do one more check, guys. This is how we run the torque wrench. You never just assume, you always go back in. Pressures move and change as you torque. Always triple check, correct. This is my triple check now, guys. Everything went down tight. What I'm doing is I'm just going through light pressure on the torque wrench until it clicks. That's all I'm doing. So we've got some movement out of those in the center. We keep getting movements out of the center ones because the pressure is changing as it's conforming to the head. But just fingers on the outside of the torque wrench. I'm not actually putting pressure down on this, because if I put pressure down on it, I will get a false reading. So some of these you guys have seen, I got quite a bit of movement out of them. Some of them haven't moved at all. So we really don't want to see these move. Okay, that's it. We're down. So that is tight. Next, we're going to move on to our spark plug. And again, that one is going to be at 18 foot-pounds or 16 foot-pounds. So Cal, do the quick measurement. What is the conversion rate on the inch-pounds for me, please? I want to say it's like 225, 226, if I remember right, for inch-pounds instead of foot-pounds. Yes, from foot-pounds to inch-pounds. So we need 16 inch-pounds or 16 foot-pounds. What is the inch-pound of that? So 16 times 12. My math skills are fading right now. Got too many other things on my head. If you guys got any questions, go ahead and chat them in. I'm going to let SoCal kind of handle some questions here for a bit while I'm finishing up. 192. Okay, so we're going to go to 190 just to be safe. So I'm going to go to 190. That'll be really close to 16 foot-pounds. And this is the spark plugs that we're torquing up now. And the reason that these have to be torqued is because you have cylinder pressure, gases. As that piston comes up, it needs to make sure that the cylinder is sealed. The only thing that might make me stop is if I don't like how the spark plugs are feeling when I go to torque these up. Yeah, I'm going to run them down. Run them down by hand first. I'm not just going to simply go straight torque. On heads that I know, that I'm familiar with, I would just run straight torque to them because they're my heads. I know them. I know that they'll hold. On a car that I've never worked on, I'm not going to... Hold on for a second, guys. Sorry about that. My air compressor decided to kick in. On heads that I've never worked on before, I don't like just putting a torque wrench to them right away. I like to take them down by hand a little bit first so that I don't strip out a spark plug in the cylinder. A stripped out spark plug is pretty much a doomsday, strip the engine down, start over kind of situation. So... pressure will blow the plug out if it isn't properly seated and torqued. Correct. Not only that, but you will lose compression. On higher compression engines such as this, it will affect fuel mileage and vehicle performance. So, in order to make sure that you do it right, you want to torque these down to the proper torque spec. Now, I do feel that you can go a pound or two lower to know that you're not going to strip the threads out, but they do need to be torqued at least down to 16 foot-pounds, regardless. Most are 18. But I do run 16s if I don't trust the quality of the head or the material or the threads. If I took it apart and it feels really crummy and nasty, I won't take it down to 18 because I just don't trust that the head will hold. So I will take it to 16 instead. It's a safer torque spec, and it will not blow the plug out at that point because you've already crushed that crush ring. So you're good with that. So now, plugs are torqued, valve covers on and torqued. We can start laying our wire harness back in where it belongs. Clipping everything into place. Okay, so that's all in there. Next is going to be our coil pack. This coil pack is a bit different. This one is a one-piece coil pack. You guys might have seen these, you guys might not. Again, these do need to be torqued as well because there is a grounding point in these coil packs. So when you put these in, these are your grounding points. If these are not torqued down, it will not get proper ground and it can arc. This could cause a misfire. Also, age will do it to where these will misfire, and you could have other potential issues such as a bad connector, a bad wire, or a bad plug. All of these create potential misfires. So here's the bolts for these. Again, if you guys got any questions, chat them in. I will try to take a look at them. SoCal's also here. He'll be able to help. If any of my other mods are in, you guys please chime in. We can go ahead and start helping people at this point. We're going to try to wrap up this project at some point here. I don't want to spend my whole day doing this, but I've spent enough of the day doing it, that's for sure. I also got to get this done for the customer too, so. So again, we're just going to run these down by hand. These will bottom out. And these don't take a tremendous amount of torque. So we don't have to get carried away and just wrench on these. That's not necessary for these, but they do need to be down tight. Some would say tight is tight, and I would somewhat agree with that. But sometimes tight might not be tight enough or could be too tight. So just kind of doing a preliminary snug. This one on this end was loose. Like, I didn't even need the ratchet to break that one loose. It was that loose. So that was not good. That coil pack was bouncing around before and could have damaged the coil pack. So we are coming into the home stretch. All right, guys, your vote. Cover or no cover? Go ahead and get that vote in now. Actually, let me set up a poll for you guys. Let me set it up as a poll. We'll let it run as a poll for a bit. Okay. I set that up as a cover, yes or no. So this is what we want to know, guys. Do we want no cover Or do we want to clean this up and put this cover back on? Now, one advantage of putting that cover back on is it could protect the coil packs a little bit. Ultimately, the protection that it's going to provide is not very good. Honestly, all this would do is hide any oil leaks that we might have that we could see underneath there, but it could also keep debris out. So let's see what the votes say here in a little bit as I work on this connector. So as I told you guys earlier here, the connector could be an issue. Connector fell apart on me. And if this is what's going on with the connector, then I might need to get a new connector. So this piece came out of the inside of the connector that is held on to the coil pack. So coil pack goes there. This piece was floating, meaning that it wasn't secured inside. Look at this clip, see if there's a way that I can back this clip out, which would give me, so this clip has a little pin here. We got 2 votes so far. Come on guys, get your votes in. We're only 50-50. Come on, get me to, there's 9 of you in here. Let's get to 4 votes, at least 4, and then we'll do a possible 5th tiebreaker. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to loosen this up to see if I can slide this clip back. Okay, so that's how the clip was going to go in there. So it was back, so what I got to do is try to slip this in here. So we're going to pop this back out by pressing this down. This is a very weird clip. I have not seen one with a plastic insert piece like this in the center. So it's a little bit more problematic to make sure that it goes in there tight. And I'm pretty sure there is a catch rail underneath that it has to hook into in order to make sure that it locks in tight. This was one way that I knew that something had happened, because this piece was just loose in there when I first started this project. All right, guys, we only got 2 more votes. Guys, hit up those polls. Let me know, cover or no cover. So this is no cover, and this is with the cover. Now, obviously, I'll clean it up if we decide to go cover, but I need to know if we think cover or no cover. I'm working on this clip. I'm trying to separate this out again. Trying to get that purple part of that clip out. So what I'm trying to do is get that purple part of that clip out. Yeah, this clip is half broke, guys. I'm gonna look at a way to just try to secure this the best I can with what's here. Not the best setup. So. All right, what do we got for polls, guys? Where are we at? Still got 2 votes. Come on, guys, get your votes in. Cover or no cover? Do we skip that cover and let it look like that where it's clean, open, and shiny, or do we put the cover on it to kind of maybe help keep debris out if there was ever an open hood situation? We got a chat coming in. I need to have a ceramic or something ready this coming summer to restore plastic on my cars. Okay, so Amazon makes a really good plastic restorer. I've done a demo on one. I'll show you guys that in just a second. Valve cover is a brand new, all one-piece aluminum. So the reason we went with this is we were having issues inside the valve cover where we were getting a check engine light because there's part of the EGR system going through it. Because of that, we had to choose to do this upgrade. And I think it's a really nice upgrade. I think it'll work well for future setups with the car, and it'll help with longevity. And that's the main thing, is the helping with the longevity is the key here. So while I'm fighting with that clip, let me see if I can grab that plastic restorer that I use. Struggling to find the plastic restorer. I will find it later. It's one that I got off of Amazon. That'll be the best one to get for that. It's definitely one on Amazon. If you're just wanting to clean the plastic and make it look back to new, black works good, or back to black works good. Yeah, that's a good one. There is one specific one that I got from Amazon that restores it pretty much to perfect. That's what I'm looking for now. And I used it on the GMC and it worked awesome. There, I think I got it. I got it, guys. All right. Took me a while to dig this out, but it was well worth it, guys. This is the plastic restorer that you guys want to get your hands on. You can get it on Amazon. This stuff works great. Really, it brings the black, almost flat plastic that starts to turn gray, it turns it straight back to black, and it stays that way for a very long time. It does work on rubber, but I don't suggest using it. Plastic and vinyl, it works the best on. This stuff is awesome. All right, so vote is still 2-2, guys. So I'll give you guys another minute while I'm messing around with this clip. Otherwise, I'll make the final vote decide. Okay. Let's see if I can get this on here now. Awesome. Got this clip in here. All right, I'm going to bring you guys in close so you can see this. This clip is a giant pain in the ass. Where are you based out of? Based out of the U.S. I'm up in the Midwest, so I deal with the salt belt. So yes, I deal with the headaches. You know, yeah, I get frustrated at you guys in California that don't have to deal with rust when you do wheel bearings. Absolutely, the best thing you can do for your paint and plastic is regular maintenance, clean, wax, protection. Yes, correct. The best is to take care of it and then continue taking care of it. That is the best. All right, so this one is a very weird clip. This center section comes out, and this purple piece is all that holds this in. So this purple piece has to be slid out. Then you take this center section out, and that's how this wire comes out. If you don't do this the right way, you'll break this clip, and you could break this connector. This piece is what holds it in there. So you have to basically pop this out, take the center section out, then you can take the clip off. Very weird design. That one's not normal, guys. We don't normally come across that. I am in Canada. We also, we're also the Rust Belt, Toronto. Yes, you guys are. So you understand the frustration of dealing with rusty wheel bearings. It gets to be way more than any of us ever care to deal with. So before I get too much more carried away, now that I got everything somewhat put back together, we're going to go ahead and stick our dipstick in here. Check our oil quick. Not only that, but we want to check to make sure that the dipstick goes in properly. Sometimes they don't bore these holes out properly, so it gets to be a little sticky. Okay. Check it one more time. Okay. We're good on oil. So as we use this, this will loosen up and we'll be able to get that out easier. What I can also do is just get a new dipstick for the customer later on, but usually they won't check it. All right, so we're going to vote on this cover. Here's the deal. We had a 2-2 vote, and it wound up being a tiebreaker. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean this cover, and then we're going to see if you guys change your mind on voting here. All right, so I can leave it like this, or I can put some black plastic covering on it to really shine it up. But here's the vote, guys. Cover. Cover. No cover. So voting's still open. I'll let that run for a minute. And then once we got an answer, then yeah, I'll go ahead and end that vote. So no cover looks so clean. Yeah, SoCal, I agree with you guys. The no cover does look good. The only thing that I would be concerned about is anything falling down into the coil pack area. But as long as the hood's never open, it doesn't really need it. And so then really all this is doing, and the reason that they did this was to protect the coil packs. That's it. Was just to put a little additional cover so that no other dirt got down inside that coil pack. That's the only reason they're doing that. And it's not necessary if you're not opening the hood and running it with the hood open. So it does come down to a cosmetic thing at this point. It really isn't anything to do with safety at all. So I kind of guessed how SoCal voted, but whoever voted the yes cover, please let me know your thoughts on that. Cover does trap dirt and hide leaks. That is correct. Oftentimes I don't run the covers because then I can see the engine. But I work on my vehicles quite regularly to where I'm not concerned about anything getting down in there. Customer vehicles I tend to be a little bit more cautious with, and it all depends on if I know where the customer drives their vehicle. If they're doing a lot of off-roading, that cover's going back on because there's a high likeliness that they're going to get dirt, mud, debris, everything down in there. If it's somebody that just pavement pounds and drives around town, I might leave the cover off because it makes it easier for me to spot oil leaks. So I'm in the process of cleaning up some tools. We're going to reconnect the battery here shortly, guys. And once we reconnect this battery, we are ready to fire it up and test drive this and make sure that it's solid. The biggest thing is we want to start it and make sure we don't have any rough idle. So to give you guys an idea of how much it costs to take things to a repair shop, I'll give you guys a little bit of info here. To have a repair shop do the work that you guys are seeing me do here, this can run people quite a bit of money. And the thing is most people will not spend this, especially if they have a loan on the vehicle, because it gets to be too costly for them to do that. This project, total with everything that needs to be done to it, is about a $2,100 project. What you guys are seeing is only the first step of this project. There's still a throttle body cleaning that needs to happen, a replace of a catalytic converter, and a downpipe after the catalytic converter with new O2 sensors. So this is only stage one of this repair. We will see this car again, and we will see this under a lot tougher circumstances when we're trying to do work that's going to be a whole lot worse. SoCal, off-road, you should be checking for leaks and crud buildup build up after each trip. Also clean air filters after all off-road trips. Correct. Oftentimes the worst thing that people do is they'll do an off-road trip somewhere. Jeeps are notorious for this. They'll take it off-road. They won't think about it. Next thing you know, they sucked a bunch of dirt inside their engine because they never replaced their engine air filter. The engine air filters can suck in a lot of dust, especially if you're out on like a Baja gravel trail or something, the amount of dust that your vehicle will kick up and get sucked into your air filter is quite astonishing. I've seen clean filters come back absolutely trashed from an off-road. All right, so it's 2-2. I'm going to go ahead and decide to leave the cover off. I will put it in the vehicle for the customer, and if they wish to have it put back on, I can easily snap it back on. But I'm going to leave cover off because it does showcase the work that was done to this engine, and also shows that the time was taken to do it right. Plus, it will make it easier for us to find leaks. So, that's my vote. Since it was a tiebreaker situation, next we're going to transition over to our battery. So, I'm going to bring you guys around. I'm going to go ahead and end poll now. Thank you, everyone that voted. I appreciate all you guys' input and how much you guys interact with the channel. This is awesome. So, I'm going to slide the battery back because there's a huge circuit board on the back of this. I'm going to do the positive first because it's the hardest one to get on all the way down and seated. I don't want to create too much arcing. So in order to avoid that arcing, I'm going to do the positive first, and then I can slide the negative down and it'll only arc once. Where if I was trying to sit there and wiggle that positive on, there's a chance that I could arc the computer out, and I don't want to do that. Okay, next I'm going to do the ground. All right, so we don't want to get carried away and over torque these and strip these out. We want these to be tight. That's all we're after, is tight. They don't need to be so tight that we're wrecking the clamps. That's one thing I notice when people do batteries is sometimes they just over tighten stuff when there's no need for it. So here's our battery tie down. And this is what I was telling you guys about the battery tie down. If we're really concerned about this rubbing through this plastic battery, you can put a piece of rubber, such as an inner tube or something thin that's rubber that won't cut through that battery. Now, it didn't have it before, so I'm not too concerned about it. It's a 10 millimeter for the battery posts. It's a 13 millimeter for the bolt that holds the battery down. Now, some people would be like, well, why are you putting the battery hold down? It won't go anywhere. There's a good reason to put the battery hold down on this car. If you guys look, there's a computer sitting right here. If this battery is slapping around, what is it doing to that computer? It's basically bouncing off the computer and could potentially damage the computer. So to play it safe, we put the battery tie down back on. I'm just getting long enough extensions. I'm going to run two 6-inch extensions down so that I can turn the ratchet without striking the vehicle. There we go. Our battery is held down. Everything is back together. We have our valve cover on with our new plugs torqued, our new coil packs torqued, and our valve cover torqued. This should cure all of our check engine issues. Some of our check engine issues look like it could have been related to somebody being in there before. And some of those things, SoCal said, those batteries move more than you think. Yes, they do. And all it takes is for you to start banging things around near the battery or near the computers, and it's going to turn into a bad day real quick. It's going to get real expensive. So you also have like a circuit board on here. You don't want this getting banged up. You don't want this computer taking damage. You don't want to have damage to your fuse panel either. So battery tie downs, important to put back on. And if you can't and it's rusted and broken, at least find a way to bungee or tie that battery down so it's not moving around. But now that we've got this done, this should cure most of our check engines. It's not going to cure them all because we do have an exhaust leak after the first cat on this engine. Plus we have a low efficiency catalytic converter, which tells me that that cat is no longer efficient. If that's the case, we would have to replace the catalytic converter. We may choose to do the downpipe first and see if it fixes it without replacing the cat, but if we have to replace the cat, guys, we already got it. And the reason we got it is because it was affordable. So we were able to get not only the downpipe, but the catalytic converter. We will see this vehicle back again. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to fire this up, and I want to listen and see if there's any misfiring in the engine. Now that everything's back together properly. SoCal, is that a knock I'm hearing? It's kind of the cold start knock that you get on the smaller 4-cylinders. It's not tremendously loud. Some of it is there is an exhaust leak underneath, so you might be hearing that tick from that exhaust leak. SoCal also said, I would rather replace the cat now than later. And that might be the route I choose to go with it. If we already have the cat, I might just choose to put it in. Because it's not going to pay for me to take this thing back apart twice. Some of that tick you're hearing is the injector tick. So there is an injector tick in this. I just noticed that. But yeah, I definitely hear an injector tick, and I hear the exhaust leak down past the cat, on the back side of the cat, in that. It's basically in the flex pipe, because there's a flex pipe in it. The flex pipe is broke. All right. Awesome, guys. Yeah, this has been a big project today. We did a lot today. Not only did I bring you guys up to speed on what was going on with my work injury, kind of what happened after the holidays. Every year, guys, I will always take off around the Christmas time and not return until probably mid-January. It's an important time for me and my family. So usually that's the time that I take off. Usually throughout the year, I want to stay pretty consistent and always bring you guys content. So that's some of the reason why you guys haven't seen me for the last few weeks. If you guys got any questions, now is the time to chat those in. We're going to go ahead and answer your questions between me and my mods. We will definitely get you the answers that you need. If there's something you're missing torque specs on, if you guys don't understand like how to do certain projects, we'll help break it down for you so that you understand kind of the steps that it'll take to put it back together. I'll do a quick rundown. I know SoCal wasn't here when I first started this stream, so I want to bring everyone up to speed, kind of what happened. I had a workplace injury between Christmas and New Year's. The injury took place in my shoulder, which restricts some of my movement in my shoulder. It is a permanent loss. I'm not ever going to get that back again. Surgery isn't guaranteed to bring it back. I've already met with the surgeon. I've done all this stuff. Guys, it doesn't look good for me having a perfect shoulder ever again. So this is something I'm going to have to deal with. Unfortunately, my current job was being rather much of a pain in the ass about this whole thing. And because they were being bad about it, I actually wound up having to find a new place to work. But the benefit is it's less physically demanding on my body and it's a lot closer to where I live. So I'm not having to travel as far. That also makes it a lot easier for me to do other projects and do other things and bring you guys more content. It also gives me more time with my family, which for the last couple of years has been really tough. I've worked very far away from my house usually, and it took me a lot of time driving to and from my job every day, that I lost that time with the family. To be honest with you guys, this stuff doesn't happen without my family. So I need to make sure that I'm there for them. And this job will give me that time back that I was losing in my drive time to and from my previous job. So a lot of benefits, a lot of good things that have come about with everything that's happened. This also means we're fat on this channel when it comes to vehicles. SoCal, you missed it, but I had a small deer hit with Malibu steel. Did some damage to the bumper cover on the right side of the vehicle. That bumper cover will have to be replaced. We're going to order a pre-painted bumper off of eBay, and we're going to order all the brackets that are needed to fix that deer hit. Now, I got lucky because it shot over the hood, hit the windshield, did not crack the windshield, did not damage the pillar, did not damage the roof line, even though it bounced off the windshield. The only thing it did was shatter the front bumper and the grills. So I'm pretty lucky on that aspect. Now, it did break a bracket behind the headlight that holds the headlight to the bumper. That's a piece of plastic and it breaks every time something hits that corner. But I also did get a new set of headlights for it. So I went with the blacked out headlights. I'm going to go ahead and put this car back together. Hopefully I'll have it together in the next couple weeks. I can start ordering parts in about a week or so. Once I order the parts, we're going to bust this thing apart. We're going to start digging into this project and get this thing done. My goal is to get this thing ready to sell during tax season. I want this car sold because I don't need it. Yes, it gets 31 miles to the gallon, but I'm only driving 12 blocks to work every day. I don't need that car. I need the four-wheel drive if it does get bad in the winter with weather, and I'm not getting rid of the Toyota. I got too much time, money, and effort stuck into it. The only thing I would do is if there was somebody out there that wanted to trade even up for a Scat Pack Challenger, maybe. That's the only thing I would do as far as getting rid of the Toyota. The Toyota is super low miles, guys. It's been an awesome little truck to go haul things with. So I do like having the truck aspect when I need it. A few more things that I'm going to want to do to that this year. Again, I would like to do a leather seat conversion, both heated and cooled leather seats from Catskin. That's something that I'm penciling in. Not sure how it's going to work out with the budget. I've got a few other things I got to take care of this year before I can get carried away spending, a couple grand in heated and cooled leather seats. I would like to get a tonneau cover for that truck. I miss having a tonneau cover. It's a lot easier to keep things clean. The tonneau cover is nice because it also helps with fuel mileage, contrary to what the Mythbusters say. If you don't have wind smacking the back of a tailgate, it will make a difference. And when it comes down to it, if you do want to put something in the box and you don't want it exposed to all the elements, tonneau cover is a nice way to go. Now, hardcover would be safer and probably more secure, but then again, you also lose the usability of the box because that hardcover will restrict the use of that box. SoCal, you got extremely lucky. Dude, you have no idea. Dude, you have no idea how lucky I got. Let me just give you kind of rough ideas of what happened with my shoulder. So I was at work and I was at a customer site trying to do some work at that customer site. They had wheel chocks there. And we're not talking rubber ones. I can step over rubber wheel chocks all day long. They had a 10-inch aluminum wheel chock, big giant wheel chock. These are not normal wheel chocks. You know, normally you would have a rubber one, you'd kick it out of the way, no big deal. These were huge ones because I'm guessing they had vehicles roll away, so they went with the bigger wheel chocks. My foot landed on that wheel chock. My foot slipped off the wheel chock because I had already shifted the weight to my shoulder, to my left leg. My foot slipped off of that. I landed square on my elbow, jamming my shoulder straight up. Ultimately, I tore the front muscle of my rotator cuff. And I tore it bad enough that there's less than 50% attached. So surgery is not going to guarantee me more mobility in my shoulder. All that they're going to do is say, okay, the two tests they had me do was one of them, put my hand here, move my shoulder out. And that was one of them. The other one was put my arm behind my back, take and lift my hand away from my back, meaning put a space between your hand and your back. I was able to do those tests and they said that's where you would be at after your rehabilitation. They're like, I don't know if I feel comfortable doing surgery on you if you're already at the level that we could expect. They said, yes, the muscle's torn. Yes, it's permanently damaged. Yes, you're going to have loss. But you're going to have to learn to figure out ways to deal with it. Now, my current job will not bring me back because I have lifting restrictions. Some of those lifting restrictions may become permanent based on the mobility loss that I'm going to have. Because of that, they're not going to bring me back. Plus, the one muscle that I need on the front side of my rotator cuff is the one that I need to be able to move heavy weight that the job requires. So that's the unfortunate reality of what happened. I waited until the end, guys, to give you all of this info about what happened to me. Guys, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe button. We do automotive content every Saturday at 1 p.m. Central. We do all kinds of different stuff. Today, you guys saw me do a complete tune-up, including a valve cover replacement on a Buick Encore. So, yeah, it's one of those things where we're trying to grow. We're trying to do more things with the channel, and this will really help build us up. SoCal, I had my shoulder surgery June of 2021. I still have 70% of my shoulder, or I only have 70% of my shoulder back. Yeah, I have strength loss in it. I have mobility. I can go like this again. It's sore when I do this, but I can do it. My problem is when I do, I'm going to turn you guys so you can see this. So if I keep my shoulder straight and I extend my arm out, it stops when it's pretty much straight with my shoulder. I can't go back beyond that. So that is a permanent loss to me. I will not get that motion back. No matter how much physical therapy I do at my house, because work comp is dragging their feet and causing problems and not approving my physical therapy. Also because now I'm going to have to start a new job so I can pay my bills. I'm not going to be able to attend all of the physical therapy that I need to. So I have to do it at home on my own. And it's the way life is sometimes. We got to roll with the punches and just kind of deal with the problems that are there facing us day to day. It's not easy, and it's really stressful on the family when the main provider is not able to provide. PT will help with that. Yes, I'm doing PT. So I'm doing physical therapy at home. I had a really good physical therapist that gave me all the exercises that I need to do for the next 3 months. They said you have to continue doing it 3 days a week for the next 3 months. They said do not give up on doing your physical therapy. They have even shown me the extra stuff that I need to do to get some of that motion back. But even though I get the motion back, I'm not going to have the physical strength there because this muscle was torn. There's certain motions that are just agonizing to do. If I go to try to pull any weight into my body like this screams at me. And it's because that muscle there's not much left of it, and I have to try to rebuild what's left to make it usable. So it sucks that it happened, but I look at the trade-off and what I'm going to gain from this. Number one, I gain a new aspect and a new outlook on life. Safety needs to be number one, guys. And I know I've said it a little bit on the channel here, but I haven't said it enough. Safety is number one. If we get hurt doing what we're doing, who's going to take care of our families? Who's going to help out? Who's going to pitch in? Who's going to cover the excess that you're not making? Truth is, there was nobody. And I can't allow that to happen in my life. So that means I need to operate a little differently. I need to think a little differently. I need to watch what I do. When I work on cars and I jack them up, I got to put a jack stand underneath it. And if you guys see me do something on this channel and I'm not putting a jack stand and the vehicle's jacked up, hey, shout it out in the chat. Call me out, because it's not worth getting hurt. It isn't. We have to make sure we're safe when we do any project. Even when I was working on this car, you guys had no idea how much I was thinking about how to tighten up these bolts without putting additional stress on the shoulder. How much it has to change and how much I have to change and adapt now to the loss that's in my arm. I try to use it and keep it usable, but I can't use it to its full ability like I can my right arm. It's going to take me a while to get back to where I could feel comfortable enough to do it. But for now, I have to play it cautious. I have to go slow. I have to drag things out. And this was something that kind of dragged me from coming back a little bit sooner in January, because I needed the time to heal after that injury. Again, that injury is going to create some other situations. We're going to be able to sell the Malibu. I can use that to kind of get things back in track from everything that's happened. We still got the 3 vehicles that we're working on. Champagne Bubbles is having engine issues, like I called it before. Those engine issues are going to cause us to potentially have to put a brand new engine in that car. I believe that the oil rings have failed, at least on 1 or 2 cylinders, to where we're blowing oil out the engine. And it's not blowing blue smoke, but you can hear it on startup. You can hear the tick. And it's a distinctive enough tick that I know that sound, that ultimately there's not much we're going to be able to do with it other than deal with the situation and try to work with it the best we can until they replace the engine. Unfortunately, they've decided to do an engine oil test. This is something that Kias and Hyundais do. Rather than them just saying, okay, yes, there's a problem with the engine, we're just going to go ahead and replace it. Nope, they're going to make you do an engine oil test for consumption. And if you're consuming enough oil, which is 1 quart per 1,000 miles, to me, excessive, very excessive. The issue is that thing is consuming about 1.5 quarts every 500 miles. So by the time we take it back down at 1,000 miles, it's going to be almost out of oil. And that's the way their test runs. They're going to run it, and if it blows up the engine, they're going to have to put a new engine in it anyway. Sad, but the worst part about it is I'm not the one who drives that vehicle all the time. So there's going to come a point where I no longer feel safe enough to let somebody drive it to where I'm going to have to drive it. And then if it does go down, it won't be so bad because I can handle it. That's the situation. And buying a brand new car, we weren't expecting to have these kind of problems. This is some of the reason that I call out the dealerships, why I shout them out and why I run them up the pole when they do stupid things. Dodge is backpedaling big time. Their sales have just plummeted. It's because they put everything in their EVs and they didn't focus on what they really should have. This has been a big problem in the Dodge brand for a long time now, ever since Stellantis bought them. I knew that was a bad mistake when Stellantis got in there, because I knew that they were going to gut the company, and that old president is the reason that it happened. They have switched and gone back to their former president, who was the one responsible for making the Ram Rebel pickup. So there is a chance, slim as it may be, that Ram might make a comeback and bring back their V8 powered engines. If they don't, the company is doomed. In my mind, they will not survive. They are not an EV company. They were never branded as an EV company. They will not survive as an EV company. That is the truth. Tesla is another story. They started as EV. All the people that have bought them have been EV fans, and that's the way it's going to be. Dodge, it's not that way. They were never, ever built as an EV car company. And for them to switch it, honestly, Stellantis only bought them to sell their cars in the US. At the time, they didn't care if the brand made money. In fact, they put out a post saying, we don't care if the brand makes money. If it doesn't, we're just going to get rid of it. To me, that sounds like you bought it for a shell company. That's exactly what that sounds like. So, that being said, the Ford side, they've been a little quiet. Yeah, they're trying to push the Rangers and Broncos more because they're more popular. Chevy is focusing more on the Silverados and the Colorados. Colorado sales have been up lately, and the Silverados have held pretty steady. Their car market on the Chevrolet side has plummeted. They just don't have the options, and with them talking about, or them actually getting rid of the Camaro, that's made it to where it's not a very good brand anymore, and most people are not going to buy into that brand. So if you're a car guy, you're not going to want to go with Chevy in the future. Yeah, they got the Corvette, but a lot of the packages for the Corvette are way too high. So, guys, I want to say thank you all for your support. It has really helped. We've grown so much here on YouTube. YouTube is where I'm at and where I'm going to stay for the future. I'm going to work on some new things that'll help get content out to you guys. That way during the week, you guys know when I go live, and you guys will see a glimpse of the topic ahead of time. So I'm working on that with one of my editors. So I do have a main editor now. She is a great resource and a great help. And I really do appreciate everything she does for the channel. She's doing it out of the kindness of her heart because, yeah, we're still growing. We're still trying to get off the ground. So I appreciate everything she does to kind of help promote this channel. It really is going to help in the future as we continue to do more projects. There's one project that I'm saving that I'm going to tell you guys now that you've made it to the end. We're going to have a pitman arm replacement that needs to happen on the GMC Jimmy. After we did that alignment, I told you guys the alignment was off. It's because the quick trick alignment tool measurements were not right. And when I took it in for the alignment, they were able to get it aligned, but they told me you have a bad pitman arm. And the pitman arm has to get replaced because it's swaying a little bit in that pitman arm because of the play. It's not going to affect my alignment, but it will affect how the steering wheel feels. So they were able to get the alignment dialed in, but they couldn't do, the steering wheel perfectly accurate because of that pitman arm. Which it's fine as long as it isn't way off when I get done with it. If it frustrates me and ticks me off, I'll take it back in and pay for another alignment. I think it was like $170. I don't want to do that, but I'll do what I got to if that's what's got to happen. But that's what I got for today. Guys, thank you for all your support. I continue hitting that subscribe button, hit the like button, ring that notification bell so you get notified when I go live, which is every Saturday at 1 p.m. And we'll see you guys on the next one.